A few weeks before, Richard had come to her house for a surprise visit. Rhea was truly surprised, and she was truly not in the mood for a visit. She had all intentions of throwing him out, but her brothers had opened the doors to him. Teddy had even whispered in her ear that he was the kind of guy that she deserved. Rhea could understand where her brother was coming from, as once upon a time her mind was there. It seemed like a lifetime ago that she actually wanted to marry Richard. Presently, she couldn't even stand him. That day she had the most serious expression on her face as she asked him what he wanted. He has smiled and said he was actually happy that her and Jason were divorced, that he didn't deserve her. Same old news. Rhea didn't care for all that as she urged him to go straight to the point. I know you might not like to stay here, and I know that you have always wanted to do your MBA. He started. Richard knew a lot about her because he listened. She had always wanted to go for her MBAs. Since when her and Richard cheered dating, it had just never happened. What about that? She asked impatiently. Well, I have a solution for the both of us. I would like to move to Chicago, and I want you to come with me. Richard said, and Rhea looked at him like he was half crazy. Maybe he was. She wondered why he would think she would actually leave the state with him, that she would actually want to leave and start over with an ex-boyfriend that she didn't even love. Before you say anything, hear me out. Your son is very young, and sooner or later, he would need a father figure in his life. You can also start schooling in the Chicago Institute of Business while I open my new branch there. Nothing has to happen between us, he assured, and Rhea didn't think twice before laughing at him. Why do you want to do this? She asked, purely out of curiosity. I want you to be happy, and I also want you as my friend. I know that you don't love me, but it doesn't seem to me like a good reason to give up, he said, and Rhea laughed again. I am sorry, Richard, but there is no way in hell that I am moving to Chicago with you, she said. Her words were full of conviction, and she had made up her mind. That day, Richard had left her house heartbroken, and her brothers had looked at her with judging eyes. She would never have guessed that a few weeks later, she would be calling Richard and telling him yes. Richard was ecstatic at her answer, so much so that he didn't believe it. She tried so much to convince herself that it was the rational thing to do, but it seemed like Jason had removed all form of rationality from her. She called her best friends, and Rory cried from the phone that she would be alone and that her baby would lose his best friend. RM was less dramatic, telling her not to lose contact with them. Her mother was worried about her and didn't want her to leave. Her father, on the other hand, was happy since it was Richard she was leaving with. Her brothers were ecstatic as she said she was over Jason. She was pretty much a professional liar then. By the time Jason's father's sentence was read, Rhea was already in Chicago. She had to say goodbye to Eve, as she couldn't leave her family, so moving into a brand new place wasn't easy at all for her. Everyone and everything looked so strange. She had lived in New York her entire life, only traveling for work-related events and sometimes for holidays. She had even gone to NYU, and so the abrupt change hit her hard. The weather didn't seem right, and everyone looked weird in Rhea's eyes. Her son didn't seem to like the place either, as she began to cry nonstop the first day they got there. Richard's house was inside the city, nothing like the gated communities that they had stayed in, so all the noise was foreign to her. Having to live so close to your neighbor was something she didn't have to worry about previously, but it was now her new problem. In a week, she hired a nanny and started processing her admission into the school. She got the spot and she was a student again. Back when she was going for her first degree, she had the latest car and her parents' bodyguards followed her everywhere. Her Rory and RM were in one squad, the same one that they had been back in high school. Their fathers were popular and rich, and so they didn't lack for anything. Stress in college was a very foreign concept to Rhea, but for the very first week, a concept that was once foreign became very familiar. She had to go to school, attend classes, do assignments, and then go back to take care of Theo. He would squeal the moment she got home. He could now stand properly, and he had taken his very first step at 10 months, though he usually fell. Motherhood had not become any easier, instead it was about 10 times harder. Without anyone to guide her, she was very, very lost. She didn't want Theo to walk, as he was always falling down, though the nanny, who was a middle-aged cherry lady, Grace, had told her not to worry. The worst periods were when Grace was on her off and she had to take Theo to school. She still didn't trust enough to leave him in daycare. Some days it surprised her how much she loved her son. She had made a few friends at the university. Most of them were her age, and Brianna, whom she was closest to, was married with a child. Rhea found that she didn't like to tell people that she was divorced. She would say her husband was in New York, as she secretly hoped that he would come for her one day. Richard and her had become close friends, but there was nothing else. It was easy to be friends with him, as they had so much in common. They could talk about the stock market and anything business. Sometimes he would ask her out, like every other time. She would politely decline. She wished that he would get to meet the woman that loved him, one that would cherish him. She hoped he would be able to get a second chance. Richard was also good with Theo, and not surprisingly, Theo loved him. He would show off his milk teeth whenever Richard was there. Rhea had finally gotten to use her newfound cooking skills, as she actually became good in the kitchen. Richard could also cook, and so it was all good. She was not a master chef or anything, but it was a big step up from not being able to boil water. Rory, RM, and Rhea were constantly in contact, as they would FaceTime every other day. They would talk and gossip about their day-to-day experiences. It was during one of their chats that RM announced that she was getting married. Rhea was so happy for her friend, as she knew that RM had been feeling left out for a while, and she was happy that her friend finally found love. Rhea's mother always called her and asked for her. So did her parents and brothers. She wasn't angry with them, as she was engrossed in her new life. She still missed them though, and as Christmas grew nearer again, she wished she could go home, but she knew she couldn't. These days she thought about Jason once in a while. She had long stopped searching for his photos online, and basically stalking him. She heard from Rhea that he had stopped moping and was moving on with his life. She not so subtly asked about his relationship life, and chided herself afterwards. Rory had told her that he was still very much single. Rory also told her that he had given up modeling, and that he presently worked in an advertising firm. The picture of Jason wearing a tight button-up suit and going to work didn't really sit well with Rhea, as she felt he would be extremely uncomfortable. She wondered why he would change his career since he loved modeling. Rhea had a feeling it had something to do with the big scandal. After Rhea left New York, Jason's father had been apprehended, and the news spread like wildfire throughout New York. His company fell, and though Jason was found not guilty, she knew it would affect his career. That and the fact that no one was seeing his son anymore. A lot of times she found herself wondering how he was doing, how he and Cece were doing. Their only responsible parent was in jail. "Are you ready to go, Rhea?" Richard asked her. He had invited her for a business dinner, and after all he had done for her, the least she could do was to say yes. He did deserve an affirmative answer from her. She had been getting ready in her small room before her mind went far and wide. She straightened her red figure hugging down and picked up her shawl to wrap on her shoulders. It was already early December, and it was bound to be cold. The last thing she wanted was to be chilly there. It was better to be safe than sorry. Richard smiled as he saw her in her dress, and Rhea couldn't help but imagine that it was Jason instead. She hadn't still gotten over him, and it was becoming sad. She wanted to move on, but it seemed like her emotions and everything else was against her. He kissed her hand and Rhea tried not to cringe. Richard had always been a gentleman and had never overstepped his boundaries, never taking liberties. Rhea tried to tell herself that she liked that, but she could not help but still miss Jason. It was almost like a curse. She took his arm as they both walked into the living room together. "Oh my God, you look so beautiful." Grace, the nanny, gushed. She was holding Theo against her hip, and her son was holding out his arms for her to carry him. Rhea smiled at the gesture. She absolutely loved her son. Rhea smiled as she kissed both his cheeks, and he managed to run his hand on her face as he smiled, smacking in his lips together in what sounded like "Mama." Her smile became even wider as her heart seemed to melt in love. She smiled again. She knew that if she stared at Theo, she wouldn't ever want to leave. "Make sure he doesn't stay up too late. You know he gets cranky," she told Grace, and the older woman just chuckled and shooed her out of the house, urging her to go have fun. Rhea hoped that she would be able to have fun at the end. Richard usually didn't go to those events, as he stopped affiliating himself with his father since he came to Chicago, but he said this one was special as his mentor was celebrating his 60th birthday. The least Rhea could do was to attend. When they got to the venue of the event, the place was crammed with people. There was paparazzi at the front of the building, making her remember her time with Jason. As she entered, she could spot some familiar faces, some people who worked with her father and all that. The fact that people from New York were there made her scared. Even after all Jason did to her, she still worried about the opinion he held of her. Richard led her through the throng of people, making a beeline to the front. She figured he probably wanted her to see his mentor. "Congratulations, Walter," Richard said, hugging a much older man with salt and pepper hair and a big build. "And who is this beautiful lady?" Walter asked, and Rhea smiled. She had to give it to him. He was smooth. "Oh, this is Rhea. She is the woman I love." At his words, Rhea froze, the smile on her face morphing into a frown. She glared at Richard, who was giving a pleading look. For the sake of propriety, she faked a smile to Walter, pretending to agree to Richard's words. Walter welcomed her with a hug, but that only reminded her of Eugene. She wasn't sure she could so easily trust her anymore. After the introductions, Walter led both Richard and Rhea to a table, and they both chatted like old friends. It surprised Rhea how close the both of them were, even with the huge age gap. The rest of the dinner was spent mingling and talking with others. She managed to avoid anyone that she could know, not wanting to give any explanation. She enjoyed the white wine, as it had been so long since she had indulged. She joked and laughed with people that she didn't know their names. She tasted different foods, and the alcohol made her openly flirt with Richard. "I need to pee," she said out loud as she felt pressure on her bladder. Everyone was also slightly drunk, and so there was no moment of embarrassment. She rushed to the restroom, and she was lucky that the line was not too long, as she got the chance to let out her entire bladder into the toilet bowl, sighing with relief as she was finally done. As she came out of the bathroom, she was met with the person she had been avoiding all night. Rhea groaned as she saw Cease. "So this is what you have been doing while my brother has been moping around. You have been busy enjoying yourself with another man." Rhea rolled her eyes at Cece's assumption. It might have seemed that way, but the woman had no right to judge her. "I don't know if you get this, Cece, but your brother and I are divorced. It means that we are not together anymore. It means that I can be with anyone that I want to. It means that I am a free woman," she said, annoyed. Her words seemed to cut deep into Cease as a sad look appeared on her face. "My brother loves you." Rhea rolled her eyes at that because she simply did not believe it. If he loved her, he would have not granted her a divorce. He would have fought for her. "I don't believe that," she said truthfully and left the room. That night when they were going home for the very first time since she broke up with him, she let Richard kiss her. She was disgusted, but she imagined it was Jason and let herself enjoy it. Jason was still feeling the after effects of his decision to grant Rhea a divorce. He could truly say that he regretted it. That day he could see the seriousness in Rhea's face, and he knew that he didn't deserve her. He loved her, but there was no way he would put her through the torture of staying with him, of being with him, even if she didn't want to. When she had first suggested the divorce, he had rejected vigorously too. He was angry and annoyed that she too wanted to leave him, that she wanted him to be alone. But after the confrontation, he had calmed down considerably. He had reasoned all what he had put her through, all the tears she had shed because of him, the time he had deceived her that Brittany was his fiancée, to when he had denied their child, even when he had run out on her because of his cowardice. He felt so bad for his actions that he knew he didn't have the right to keep her there. He loved her so much that he needed to let her go. He thought it over and over that afternoon, tossing and turning on his bed that had become so much harder to sleep in since Rhea didn't stay there anymore. He stood up from his bed with a heavy heart. Only hours after Rhea had given him the papers, he went to her room and knocked the door. He swallowed his fears as he opened his mouth to speak. Rhea's eyes looked pleading and he hoped that she would say something, anything just to give a piece of assurance that would make him change his mind. But she didn't say anything, and so he set his mind. His hand shook as he signed away a year of marriage. He signed away his love. He signed away what seemed like his only hope to get back together. He gave her the papers and immediately went to the garage and picked up the keys to his Bentley, driving at full speed to the bar. He had drunk well enough before he had drunk-dialed Alex. He groaned and moaned about how he didn't need them, about how he didn't need Theo and how he didn't need Rhea. He tried and tried to convince himself, but nothing seemed to be working. When she finally left, carrying her bags and moving all her things, it felt like she was moving everything away from his heart. He felt so empty. He moped around the house for days after, and the days turned to weeks. He would hear Rhea cooking in the kitchen, and he would hear a child crying in the house, and he would search for Theo, so much so that he felt he was getting crazy. He would feel around the bed in the night, his hand moving for a feel of soft flesh. Then he would remember that Rhea wasn't there. It was so much that Alex and even Cease had to help him. He had been slowly falling into the proverbial dark pit. He didn't have the appetite to eat or the will to sleep. He just rolled around all day, moping and walking around. He just kept on reminding himself that he didn't need them, that he could live his life without Rhea and Theo, that they weren't important to him. Yet every day he would stare at their pictures or mull over their memories. It was getting too much. Everyone was getting scared. Everyone was worried. His father was sentenced to jail and he had no idea. He didn't even care. "Get your lazy ass up." Alex had shouted, barging into his room. The sound of the door banging, coupled with the loud sound of his voice, made Jason's head vibrate with a headache. "Will you fucking shut up?" he growled, snuggling deeper into the bed that he had been sleeping for the last few weeks. He had no idea that Alex was even in town, but he figured that it was his staff that had called for his attention. "Get your ass up, you pussy. I can't believe you have been lying around and moping for 2 full weeks," Alex said, and Jason was a bit surprised. He had no idea that it had been up to 2 weeks since he had seen Alex. "Just leave me alone, Alex. I never thought it would come to this. I thought you said you didn't need her. Then why are you here and why the hell do you look like you're depressed? Alex asked and Jason growled. I don't fucking need them. But if she comes back you will take her, right? Alex asked and that single statement got his attention. For the first time since Alex entered into his room, he actually moved his body to sit up. He made an actual movement. What do you mean? He asked. His interest was already piqued. God, you stink! Alex exclaimed and Jason rolled his eyes, but sniffed the air anyway, giving Alex a look that said, get to the fucking point. Do you think she would take you back as you are looking like some expired milk? He asked and Jason thought a little. When was the last time you even took a bath? Jason couldn't even remember, but he knew that the thought of getting close to water was already making him feel nauseous. You don't even have a fucking job. Alex was referring to the fact that he had quit. Isabella had come to see him several times, but he had turned down every visitor. If you really want your girl, you should stand up, take a fucking bath and go get her. Alex shouted. What if she doesn't want me? He asked and Alex groaned. It was clear that he was getting frustrated. He all but pushed Jason into the bathroom and forced him to have a bath. Cease also came along with the forcing and forced Jason to wear reasonable clothes and to actually eat. They couldn't force him to go outside, and so they hired a therapist. It wasn't easy, but the therapist helped him. He told him that there were ways all that could have been avoided, and that he would have not needed to go this deep. But Jason hadn't seen the signs. He took the old man's advice, and he pushed himself into something new, something to take his mind off Rhea and Jason. He stopped asking for information about them from everyone as it began to make him seem like a stalker. He started to go job hunting. He would be forever grateful to Alex and Cease from bringing him out of that pit, from dragging him out. They had both stayed with him throughout the difficult times, even if he had threatened to throw them out multiple times. He began all over again, and when he came out, he realized the scandal that had begun to be associated with his name. His career in modeling had been crashed to the ground, even though most people didn't know he had already resigned. He had been used to the paparazzi, to the lights and to the gossip. He even reveled in them, as he knew why they were photographing him. But this time around the story was different, and they were all accusing him of being a crook, just like his father. He hadn't even appeared in court, because he hadn't been called. But that didn't convince them that he wasn't involved. He had discovered that he wanted to work in advertising, in creating ideas. The thought of it appealed to him as he had enjoyed the job when he did it while working with Rhea, a year and some months ago. Everywhere he went he was looked upon as someone unethical, like a bloody thief, and no one trusted him. He would have simply worked in his father's company, but it had closed down due to mismanagement of funds and so much debt. He didn't know much about business management, but his sister had paid all the workers, sold the buildings and let them go. Their father was broke, but luckily for them, they had other sources of living, as they didn't always depend on him. The period when Jason actually found a job was 1 month after looking, and when he heard that Rhea and Theo were no longer at his in-laws' place, his ex-in-laws' place, that she had moved to where he didn't even know. The fact that she wasn't in the same city with him anymore almost made him go back into depression. The thought was sweet and enticing then, but he was able to withstand it because of his job. His job was of the most unconventional method. He got a job in an advertising company through Nate's help, as he didn't want to work in Nate's company and be unfair to his workers. He had actually read marketing in college, but by then he just wanted to do anything that would be against his father, anything at all that his father wouldn't like, just to spite him. On his first day, he had worn a suit and tie like he usually saw people wear to work. But when he had gotten there he wished that he hadn't. Everyone else was wearing something casual, mostly t-shirts and a pair of jeans. One particular man was dressed like a hobo with the flowing colorful trousers and the big scarf. They had all been so nice and welcoming to him. He was in a team of 5 members, and each of them worked together. His opinions were heard and no one mentioned his father, or why left his modeling career. No one talked about his past, and they all seemed to look forward to the future. He felt like he belonged to their own little family. After work on Fridays, they would go out together to a bar. Tracy, a beautiful brown-skinned lady that was also part of their team, was the closest to him. Jason knew that she had more than friendly feelings towards him, and he had no idea how he would stop them. She was not one of those models that just wanted to sleep with him to move up the chain. She didn't just want him for the fame. It seemed like she didn't even care about his fame, and he couldn't bring himself to break her heart. When he was much more emotionally sound, he began to feel his father's pain. He hadn't still forgiven the man for all the pain he had caused both him and sister, but he felt bad for him. He started visiting once in a while, and he watched the man that bore him go slowly and slowly mad, as he talked about his creations and how he had begun to create something new in the prison, something that would break him out. At first, he wasn't bothered as that was his way. He always did that. He was always thinking about new things he could create, new things he could build. When he was younger, he actually looked up to him. But after his father started to force him to play with only robots, he began to withdraw. He didn't like them that much. In prison, his father's eyes had begun to have that maniacal glint as he talked about his creations, and after a while he began to become violent. Jason knew that the enclosed space was starting to get to him. Cease had cried at the sight of their father. Jason had comforted his little sister. Their father was not the best, but now that he was gone, they were truly alone. Jason was sitting in his living room and talking with Tracy on a project that they embarking on for work, and everyone planned to meet at his house. But after 1 hour of waiting for everyone in his house, it was just him and Tracy. "Oh my God, that baby is so cute. Is he your nephew?" Tracy asked, standing up again to touch Theo's picture on the wall. And Jason groaned, following her steps and holding her hand before she could touch anything. "Don't touch it, and he is my son," he said a little harder than he wanted it to come out. She looked hurt by his words and demeanor that she quickly dropped her hand. Before he could apologize to her, he heard his sister's voice. "Guess who I saw in Chicago?" she said, plopping down on one of the bar seats and twirling around. She had not yet noticed Tracy. Jason's mind immediately went back to Ria's reaction when she first met Cease, and he couldn't help the chuckle that left his lips. "Why are you laughing?" Cease asked, turning around. Her expression changed immediately and she noticed Tracy. "Oh, I see you have a visitor." His sister basically sneered, and Jason just smiled at her behavior. "Let me make introductions, Cecilia. This is my co-worker, Tracy. We were having a work-related meeting," he said, stressing the word work so that Cease didn't get any ideas. "Tracy, this is annoying my little sister, Cease. She sometimes barges into my house unannounced." Trace's entire demeanor seems to light up at the realization that Cease was just his sister. Tracy, can we go on with the meeting later? I mean, the rest of the team isn't here. There is really no need," he said, hoping that she would actually take a hint and leave. "It's all right. I will get going. Nice to meet you, Cease. See you later, Jay," she said, calling him by the new nickname she adopted for him. "You don't like her?" Cease said the moment Tracy left, and Jason rolled his eyes. "Don't use her as a rebound. She doesn't deserve it," she said again. "What is it, Tracy?" he asked. He knew that there was a reason she was actually there and not to advise him about relationships. Well, you won't guess who I saw in Chicago, she said again excitedly. Who, Rhea? He asked jokingly, calling the first name that came to his mind. How on earth did you guess that? I didn't even give you any hints. She whined, and he realized that he was correct. She had actually seen Rhea there. Seriously, you actually saw her? How did she look? Is she fine? Did you see Theo? He asked all at once, and Cece's expression changed. She is fine, all right, and no, I didn't see Theo. She was at a party with another guy, Cece said vaguely, and Jason felt anger rise in him, but he didn't want his sister to see that. After all, he didn't even deserve to be angry. We are divorced, Cece. She has the right to be with other men. After all I have done to her, she deserves better, he said remorsefully. Cece looked at him sadly, her eyes showing pity, and Jason didn't want his little sister to pity him. I don't think you will still be saying that if I tell you who I saw her with, Cece said smugly, and Jason frowned. Was it someone he knew? XXXIX. Missing you, Rhea. Rhea tried her best, she really did. She tried her best to move on, but she couldn't, she simply couldn't. She missed Jason, she missed him so much that it physically hurt. You keep zoning out, Rhea. Brianna, her course mate said. Rhea faked a smile and moved her eyes to her friends. They were both having lunch at a restaurant in front of the school. It had been a whole week since she let Richard kiss her. Things had been extremely awkward since then. She had been forcing herself to enjoy the kiss when she suddenly pushed him off her person. She couldn't do it. She felt repulsive and vile. She remembered apologizing to Richard, and for the first time, she saw Richard angry. He looked royally pissed. That day she had rushed to her room, and she had locked the door soundly behind her. She had brushed her teeth for way longer than necessary, bathing herself until she felt raw. It was when she woke up the next morning that she began to rethink her actions. She had been extremely wrong. She had stringed Richard along, giving him false hope, when she knew that there was no way she would love him, that he would never have a chance with her. Rhea tried her best, she really did. She tried her best to move on, but she couldn't, she simply couldn't. She missed Jason, she missed him so much that it physically hurt. You keep zoning out, Rhea. Brianna, her course mate said. Rhea faked a smile and moved her eyes to her friends. They were both having lunch at a restaurant in front of the school. It had been a whole week since she let Richard kiss her. Things had been extremely awkward since then. She had been forcing herself to enjoy the kiss when she suddenly pushed him off her person. She couldn't do it. She felt repulsive and vile. She remembered apologizing to Richard, and for the first time, she saw Richard angry. He looked royally pissed. That day she had rushed to her room, and she had locked the door soundly behind her. She had brushed her teeth for way longer than necessary, bathing herself until she felt raw. It was when she woke up the next morning that she began to rethink her actions. She had been extremely wrong. She had stringed Richard along, giving him false hope, when she knew that there was no way she would love him, that he would never have a chance with her. Seeing Cece that night had muddled her senses, and her behaving like she was doing something wrong made Rhea angry. She wanted to show Cece that she didn't hurt anymore, and that she was okay, that the pain wasn't there, and that there was hope for her. Rhea! Her friend shouted again, attracting the attention of people around, and Rhea just sighed. What is it, Brianna? She asked. Her friend looked concerned and worried, and Rhea felt guilty for using such a tone on her. I am just worried about you. You have been like this for a week, her friend said, and Rhea pursed her lips. She hadn't told Brianna about her weird relationship troubles with Jason. She had just vaguely told her that her husband was in New York. Brianna didn't know why. Does this have anything to do with the party you went to last week? Did you meet someone that you didn't want to? She asked. Brianna was very perceptive and Rhea had no idea whether she was psychic or not as she hit the nail on the head. "I met my sister-in-law," she said truthfully. Brianna looked confused. She was probably wondering why the presence of her sister-in-law would affect her so. She felt Brianna would prod further, but fortunately enough she didn't. "Okay," she just said, though the expression on her face showed that it was not okay, that it couldn't be okay. It wasn't that she didn't trust Brianna, but she didn't need one more person to judge her for her decision. It was getting close to 4 months since she had last seen her husband, and they 4 months had been torture. "Oh my God, it is already time for the exams," Brianna said, getting up abruptly from the chair. The raven-head woman even looked graceful as she rushed up to stand, placing her small feet on the ground. In height, Rhea was taller than Brianna, and by a lot too. But unlike Rory that was short and rounded, Brianna was short and slim. She had a bony wrist and tiny waist, making her look so delicate that she might break. She talked as delicately as she looked, taking her words one at a time. She reminded Rhea of a princess that belonged in a fairy tale and not in the real world. "Really? So soon?" Rhea asked as she also stood up, though not as graceful as Brianna. They were having their final exams before their Christmas break. Rhea had resumed way later than other students when the lecture was in full swing. She was admitted but only on pardon. She didn't want to stay home for another year to start a semester all over again. Brianna and her rushed into the school and into the classroom to quickly sit for and write the exams. She tried to focus, but all that was on her mind was how Jason would view them, after she had basically denied him. It was almost Christmas, and it was terribly cold. The roads were covered with ice and every corner looked white with snow. Rhea was starting to regret moving to one of the coldest states in America. Theo was worse as he had caught the flu. It was the first time Theo was seriously sick, and Rhea was scared out of her wits. By that time she had finished her exams and was ready for Christmas break. Theo's legs were stronger on the ground, and his favorite sport was running and falling. She was having enough of a headache, trying to keep from getting injured when he caught the flu. She had been so scared, and Richard had stayed with her. He stood as the child's father, and he was so caring. Rhea was so angry that she couldn't force her heart to love him. She couldn't force herself to stop thinking of Jason. She had heard from Rory that he was doing fine, and she was sure that there would be no way he would be pining for her like she was pining for him. She loved way too much, and he didn't love her. She would be lying if she said she hadn't been both consciously and unconsciously waiting for Jason to knock on her door since she had seen Cease. She had no doubt that Cease would tell her brother about seeing her with Richard. Jason knew where she was, and he could come anytime he wanted to. She waited for a week and nothing happened, and a week turned to a month, and she was already distracted by Theo's sickness. Theo's illness only took a toll on him when he was sick. When he finally resumed a week to Christmas, he was as bouncy as ever. She could now hear his mama clearly, and he was beginning to call Richard Dada, or it could also be that it was his pronunciation of Richard. But either way, the fact that Theo knew Richard more than he actually knew his own father didn't sit well with Rhea. She knew that Jason was not the best father, but she wanted him in her son's life. She didn't want him to grow up calling a stranger Dada. The problem was that his father didn't want him. At least he didn't want him enough to actually look for him. Rhea was pretty sure she wasn't so hard to locate. Theo spent his first Christmas with his mother and Richard. He hid the gift boxes like drums, and squealed when she removed the wrapping paper. He loved the Christmas lights on the tree, and would sit on the ground and stare at it. He ate some popcorn and mashed potatoes, though he basically wasted them all. He seemed even more chipper at that time of the year. Rhea missed Jason even more during that period. She pinned over him like had done the Christmas before, when she was still pregnant and ready to pop. Rhea had invited Brianna for Christmas dinner with all hopes of doing some matchmaking. Unfortunately, they both didn't seem interested in each other, as they didn't talk directly to each other during the dinner, no matter how much she had tried to steer the conversation in their direction. "I know what you were trying to do," Brianna said as she escorted her to her car, little cold smoke coming out of her mouth. It was so cold, but the roads were at least safe to drive. "What?" she asked, acting all coy. "You are trying to hook me up with Richard, but it won't work out. I swing for the other team," she said nonchalantly, and it took her a while to actually realize the meaning of what she was saying. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. She would have never guessed that she was into women. Rhea mentally did face-palmed herself. She had made such a fool of herself, and Richard probably knew she was a lesbian. "You didn't ask, and I actually thought you knew that it was obvious enough," she said, shrugging. "Richard is actually a nice guy, and I think the problem is that he is actually too nice," she said, chuckling a bit. "I have a husband, Brianna," she reminded her friend. It felt good and safe to her to tell everyone that she was still married, as though she wasn't the one who gave Jason the divorce papers and basically forced him to sign them. That was something she was still regretting. "Yeah," her friend said, though she didn't look convinced, and it seemed she knew that she was actually lying. Rhea could not blame Brianna for that. She was actually lying. Her friend went home that evening, and she took calls from her friends and family. Everyone was disappointed that she didn't come home for Christmas. Her mother was especially angry that she didn't get to see her only grandchild. Her father was angry he didn't get to see his baby girl. Her brothers actually admitted that they missed her. Rhea wanted both their babies' parties to be together. "The best friends are having a fallout, Rhea, and it is your fault," Rory had said. Rhea had laughed it off back then, but the words affected her more than she would admit to anyone. She didn't like separating her son from his family, but she was selfish and she actually wanted to be happy. Except that she wasn't actually happy. She faked a smile, but she could not be happy. Her cheeks hurt from smiling, and nothing came from her mind anymore. RM had informed both her and Rhea that her wedding date had been fixed for March, and she was coming to New York in February to meet her parents and all. She was the only one out of 3 of them that had a normal relationship. She had dated and she liked him, and he had proposed to her, and they were getting married. Rory had been betrothed from birth, and her story was too long and complicated to explain. She wondered what she would tell Theo when he asked where she met his father. She couldn't tell him they met in a club where they went on to have a one-night stand. Rhea wondered if she would find love again, if she would have the little girl that she had always wished for. She wondered if she should just fuck it all and drop her pride, and just call Jason, if she should just beg him to come get her, if she should plead and tell him she loved him. Every time those thoughts would come, she would push them to the back of her mind, always thinking and never actualizing them. The new year came and she shouted Happy New Year with the rest of the crowd. Though her new year was a sad one, as it seemed Jason would never come for her. She resumed school and pushed herself into her schoolwork, while also planning for her son's first birthday. She pushed herself more and more into her schoolwork with hope that eventually forget about Jason, but that didn't work. His face was not on billboards anymore, but it seemed like she was seeing him everywhere. She knew that she wasn't going mad, just lovesick, and every time Richard would ask her out, she would become closer and closer to saying yes, just so that her son would have a father, and that maybe then she would be able to move on, that she wouldn't miss him anymore. The thought of intimacy with Richard always had her reeling, and the fact that he pleased her too much made her know that there was no way they would last. even if it was just a marriage of convenience. Everything around her kept pushing her to that one man, a man that she was sure she didn't love. It wasn't that he wasn't worthy, that he wasn't caring enough, or that he hurt her, but she couldn't just be with him. For Christmas, she had wished for love. Little did she know that she was getting a late Christmas present. It was Richard. She said, and the rage that overcame Jason was not something he could explain. He basically saw red. Jason had never been so angry in his life. He was so pissed that he needed anything at all to put out his aggression. It just had to be the fucker, it couldn't be anyone else. The anger he was feeling was blinding, but he managed to hold himself. He knew that it was anger Cease was expecting, and he didn't want to give her the benefit of doubt. He wanted to show that it didn't hurt him, that the fact that Richard was with Rhea didn't affect him. He wanted to show that he didn't need her. That since she had left him, that he could do without her. He was being unnecessarily stubborn to himself. It's fine, Cease. We are divorced now and Rhea is allowed to be with whoever she wants to, he said, clenching his fist and grinding his jaw. His sister stared at him oddly, as he was sure that the expression on his face didn't match his words. Cease looked at him with searching eyes, but he stared back at her. She didn't challenge him, and then Jason was satisfied. You know, I have to go see someone, Cease said vaguely. Jason knew she was running, because she couldn't get the reaction she wanted from him. Jason had never been a violent person. Not from the lack of anger, but from the lack of strength. Immediately his sister left the room. He threw the glass cup that he was on the table, the one that Tracy used to take water, he threw it straight at the wall. Loving the shrill sound that the glass made as it collided with the wall, shattering it into tiny pieces. He thought that would quell his anger, but it didn't work, and he growled to himself as he marched to his room. He had no intentions of touching alcohol. Jason was in his office with his other team members, thinking of a pitch for a new toy company, when his phone rang. He was in the process of explaining an idea he had to his team, and so when it rang the first time, he didn't pick it up. He felt the caller would get the hint and call back later. But the phone rang, and so he had to excuse himself to take the call. He was surprised and a bit annoyed to see that it was his sister that was calling him. What is it, Cease? I was in a meeting, he said, his annoyance seeping through his tone. It's Dad. She stuttered, and her tone immediately made him stop. Cease sounded weak and tired. She had not sounded like that since their mother left for the first time when they were younger. She had cried and cried then, and though he was still but a child himself, he had been the one to comfort her. Where are you? Just stay calm, Cease. I will be there in a minute, he said. I am in the prison hospital. It's Dad. She said before she burst out crying. Not simple sobs but full-blown cries. Don't worry, Cease. I will be there, he said before quickly going back to his office to take a quick excuse. He wasted no time in driving down to the prison hospital. On his way there his mind was filled with different possibilities. From Cece's call, he could tell that something was wrong with their father, but he couldn't tell what it was. Though he has a nagging feeling that his father might have hurt himself during one of his maniacal episodes. Jason had been trying to get his father out of prison and to a psychiatric hospital, but it was seemingly impossible. Rhea's father refused to drop the charges, and there was no test done on his father to show that he had maniacal tendencies. As he got to the hospital, which was filled with people in uniform from nurses on scrubs to policemen in uniform down to prisoners in orange. I am here for Eugene White, he said frantically to the woman behind the counter. Room, she said, and Jason quickly rushed to the rooms. Since he had no idea where he was rushing, so he got lost more than 2 times. He sighted his sister from afar. She was looking so small and frail as a larger person's arms were around her body. By the way she was shaking in his hold, Jason could tell that she was crying. "Jason!" She cried as soon as she noticed him, removing herself from the man's hold and rushing towards him. He could recognize his best friend Alex holding her. Cease rushed into his hold, and he hugged her tight. Her face was wet with tears, and Jason could feel dread wash over him. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. He wanted to ask, but he needed his sister to at least calm first. He hugged her tight, as he could basically feel her sadness seep through to him. She seemed so weak, so down. He stole a glance at his best friend, Alex. He had met both him and Nate through Cease. He had just graduated from university, and suddenly Cease had come one day with a guy that she claimed would get her into their mom's good books. Back then she had been so eager to please their mother. After she left them for the first time, she began coming once in maybe 2 years. Jason hated it. She would destabilize their lives and then she would leave, leaving Cease broken every single time. He had to reassure her that it wasn't her fault, but he was not sure that she believed him. When Cease was 18, their mom had come back and basically demanded that she dated Nate. At that time Cease fancied herself in love with him, but Jason knew that it was because of their mother. At first Jason had hated Nate, but he had come to terms with his relationship with Cease. They had actually gone strong for years before they finally broke up. Everywhere there was Nate, Alex was there too. They had become closer over the years, and Jason had taken him as a brother. His so-called best friend looked down with a touch of guilt on his expression. Alex was a typically jolly guy, and being sad was a new development for him. Something had to be wrong. Jason knew that the guilt was because he had caught him with his sister. He didn't like the idea, but that was not the time. He was still holding Rhea when a doctor came out of the room that Cease was standing in front of. "Family of Eugene White?" the doctor asked. "Yes," Jason said, slowly extracting his sister's arms from his body. "Your father is now stable." The doctor started and Jason let out a breath. He didn't know he was holding. "But he has to be closely monitored. A psychiatric ward would be more suited than a prison. The environment is just harming his mental health." The doctor continued, basically repeating his thoughts for the past few weeks. Jason knew that his father needed to be in a psychiatric ward, but he had no means to achieve that. "What happened to him?" Jason asked, as the doctor had not mentioned any activity that brought him to the hospital. "Well, your father had tried to commit suicide by cutting one of his major veins with a piece of broken tile." Jason was absolutely confused. That was the last thing he would have thought of. His father had been violent, but he had never been sad. He could have guessed that the man was depressed. He wasn't able to succeed as he had cut only a minor vein before he was found and brought to the hospital, though he had lost a lot of blood. The severity of his father's situation hit him then. He knew that he had to do something about it, but first he had to see the man. "Can we see him now?" he asked the doctor. "Of course you can. I will take my leave." Jason was surprised when he got to the hospital. His father, who had always been wider where he was lanky, was looking small, frail and weak on the bed. His hair looked completely gray and it looked like some of it had gone off. His father looked like he had basically aged 10 years in the week he had last seen him. "Dad," he said. His voice came out much more crooked than he intended. His father's eyes were closed and Jason knew he was asleep and that he wouldn't hear him, but he called him anyway. "He looks so weak," Cease noted. "Yes," he agreed. He had never seen his father like that. For the next 2 weeks he spent all of his time nursing his father. He spent the rest of his time bonding with his family. Him and Cease got much more closer and he learned to forgive his father. It turned out that it was passion that drove him to greed. His passion for creation was so much that it was controlling him and not otherwise. It pushed him to do things that he later regretted. Eugene apologized and promised to be a better father. Jason forgave him not because he believed that he would actually be better, but because he felt everyone deserves a second chance, including his shitty father. He tried to get Ria's father to drop the charges, and though the man was angry, he was also honorable. After making him sign some documents, he did drop the charges and Eugene was a free man. His father started seeing a therapist that helped him to control his urges. In a month, he was getting better and stronger. He could even say he was getting better emotionally. The stress of taking care of his father, coupled with the thought that Ria was with another man, took its toll on Jason. He was barely eating and it even affected his work performance. Tracy seemed to notice that and she kept on coming on to him. The knowledge that he already had a child clearly didn't scare her away. Though Jason claimed not to need Ria and Theo, he really did miss them. It wasn't like when he was slowly going depressed, but he missed their presence in the house. He missed actually having someone to return home to. He missed not having an empty house. He missed her food. He missed Theo's cries. All the time he would think of his son and how grown he would be. It was almost Christmas and it was as cold as always. He remembered that the previous Christmas, he was halfway across the planet, and Ria was heavy with children. And that Christmas he wouldn't be with her either. He wouldn't get to see Theo on his very first Christmas. His son would be with some other man. Some days he would wonder if Theo had started talking, or if he could walk properly. He would wonder if he called Richard Daddy, and if Ria would eventually marry the other man. Throughout the holidays, Jason almost drove himself mad with thoughts. He hated that Ria was away for him, but he didn't feel that there was anything he could do about it. He felt his hands were tied. He attended Christmas dinner with his family, which consisted of his recovering dad, a sulking Cease, and him. The dinner was down because Jason wasn't happy. Cease was sulking because he had refused that Alex should come to the dinner. He still didn't want to imagine that his best friend was sleeping with his sister for the second fucking time. His father was the only one that was actually trying to be cheery and attempting to lift up spirits, but that wasn't enough for the spirits to be up. Jason was glad for only one thing, and that was the fact that his mother didn't make any of her surprise visits with her brand new family. Jason had shouted Happy New Year, fully aware of the fact that his family was miles away. Cease had traveled with Alex and his father was trying to get his life back. Jason felt lonely. The office also had a New Year's party after the New Year. By then Jason was frustrated and Tracy was desperate. It was held at a club near their office and almost everyone was there. The only reason why Jason was there was because his house was suffocating him, and everything reminded him of Ria. Tracy was dressed to kill, which was highly abnormal. She looked kind of weird in a little red dress and her brown hair. The moment reminded him of the first time he had met Ria. Ironically, that night he had been as frustrated as he was. She looked as innocent as Ria had, and if he closed his eyes for a moment, she could actually imagine that it was her. "Hi, Jason," she said as she took a seat close to him. Her voice had ruined the imagination he had procured, and he could see that she was not actually Ria. "I don't need her," he thought to himself, and took a shot of whiskey, loving the harsh burn that it caused on his throat. Maybe if he drank, he could imagine it was Ria. He gave Tracy a smile, and that was all the encouragement that she needed. She started talking about anything and everything. She would rub her nail on his bare hand, and she would smile, flirting. The alcohol started muddling with his senses, and it wasn't long before he started flirting back. After a while all he could see was Ria's pink lips, the ones that he hadn't touched for so long, the ones that he longed to kiss. Without giving it much thought, he moved and touched his lips to hers. She immediately started responding, moving his lips to hers. "Jason!" she moaned as he bit her lips, and just like that the haze of the alcohol disappeared. Through her voice he realized that it wasn't Ria he was kissing. "I can't do this," Jason said, pushing Tracy of his body. He felt disgusted with himself. He really didn't understand himself as he was single. "I have a wife and I love her," he said consciously for the first time. It was there and then that he knew that he couldn't move on. He could never do without Ria. It hit him that he wouldn't see his son turn 1 year old, that he would never see Ria pregnant again. It was then that it dawned on him that he needed to fight for his family,